I hope you're planning on reviewing the prequel. This is how I like my horror.
This was a good review. You were very clear and it was to the point. And I was wondering, will you do the other book of this called The Playground, Child of Divorce? If not, it's wondering.
Can't wait for the Playground
I was able to hear the book.
This video has been my introduction to your channel, and I'm glad it was. Would love to see you cover the sequel, Child of Divorce.
But overall,
oh my god, please, can you cover the new Playground book? I am
Alright, I get it! You see, all the way back in January, I decided to do a review for a splatterpunk book called Playground, a book by Aaron Beauragard. I had done disturbing literature before, but when I made this one, I had a lot of fun. It was a good blend of corny horror and actually really dark stuff. And that is what Playground is famous for, and I liked it. I wouldn't have made a video about it unless I felt that way. And most people I have met through my YouTube videos agree that Playground is one of, if not the best splatterpunk book, and I agree that it's up there. The character, Rock, from Playground is actually a very well-written character in the genre that is not really known for its character writing, and most people seem to agree on that. Well, recently, Aaron Beauregard released the second book in the Playground series, that being the prequel called Playground, Child of Divorce. And as a fan of the very first Playground, and a child of divorce myself, of course I was going to cover it here. Now obviously read the first book first or watch my video on it here, but you should read it obviously for the best experience, because otherwise you might be lost in the characters or setting or the general vibe of the Playground series, because this book is a lot like the original. So know that going into it, I won't spend as much time describing the returning characters, as you should know about them from the first book. But if you don't know how we do things on this channel, let me break it down for you. We start out with an intro, which you are listening to now, where we talk a little bit about the author and a little bit about the book itself. And then we have the summary, which is the bulk of the video, where we do just that. We summarize the book. Then finally, we have the analysis, where we talk about the themes and takeaways from the piece. But with all that out of the way, I really appreciate all of you, and I would love it if you could like the video, because it helps me make videos like this. You're all heroes to me. But without getting any more into the intro, let us start getting into Aaron Beauregard's Child of Divorce. 1993. Matthew sat in his room with his little TV, looking at Razor Ramon on the TV. A character on TV telling him about how he needs nobody and no one. He needs to be the bad guy. Matthew's world had recently been split in half. His mom and dad divorced. His mother had a new boyfriend named Bill, and all she would do recently is throw money at him, as if that helped his broken emotions. According to Matthew's dad, it was all his money though through child support anyway, and it showed as Matthew's dad lived in a shitty little apartment. Matthew leaves his room and sees his mom holding Bill, her new boyfriend, in the living room. Bill says, "Hey kiddo, I know I gave you some unsolicited advice, and I wasn't trying to replace your dad, so I got you a gift to make it up to you." Bill pulls out a red and black packaging and Matthew's eyes light up. The Omega Fireball. The yo-yo that people used in world championships. And on the other side, his name engraved on the plastic, Matthew. "Wow, this is really special," Matthew says. Bill says he's glad he thinks so. Matthew sees his mom put her arm around Bill, and all of his excitement feels like it's been sucked out of the room. Matthew turns away and says his dad's coming, he needs to get ready. His mom calls out, "What do you say to Bill? Say thank you. Being ungrateful is a sin, you know." Matthew turns around and says, "You know what else is a sin? Divorce." Matthew sits in his father's small apartment and played video games while his father snored on the couch. It was annoying, but it wasn't as bad as hearing the injured rodent struggling in the corner of the room. He wonders to himself if the divorce was because of him. His parents always reassured him that it wasn't his fault, but it's not like he asked, so maybe it was his fault. His father had promised to take him to the playground today though, but it was already almost dark and his dad has just passed out from his afternoon beers on the couch. Matthew knew that if he wanted to go to the playground today, he had to wake his dad up now before dark. Matthew hesitated because sometimes when his dad drank, he got argumentative. But the best way to get what he wanted though was to mention Bill in front of his dad. His dad hated Bill, something they actually had in common, but mentioning something Bill had done could always get Matthew his way with his dad. He goes to wake up his dad and says, "Dad, if we're gonna go to the playground, we gotta go now." His father groggily wakes up and says, "Yeah, buddy, of course." They then end up leaving with the dying squeaks of the rodent calmed down, and Matthew wonders if he should tell his mom about this place and how dirty it is. When they get to the playground, Matthew tries to swing higher and higher, but he can't. He can only go side to side. His dad keeps offering to help him, but Matthew just whips his head around and says, "No, I have to learn for myself." His dad says that, well, he can just help a little bit. Matthew once again just says no. He was mad at his dad. If he hadn't been drunk asleep on the couch today, maybe they could have had more time to learn how to swing. His dad says that he needs to calm down and be patient. You know, if you want to be a dentist like me, you have to... Matthew stops his dad and says, "No, I don't want to be a dentist anymore. Bill says that cleaning is a woman's job, even people's teeth. A real man works with his hands, like Bill's construction company." Matthew didn't really believe that, but he knew it would crush his dad. He always had a weird pride in being a dentist and wanted his son to be just like him. Matthew continues, "Because I don't want to live in a rat-infested apartment." His dad looks hurt and just says, "The apartment thing's just temporary, kid." Matthew just says he's going to go on the merry-go-round instead. His dad half-heartedly asks, "Do you want me to push you?" Matthew once again just says no, he needs to learn on his own. He gets on the merry-go-round, and as he does, another mother and her child come to the park too, and the girl gets on the swing, and swings really fast, and she even looks younger than him. The mother and Matthew's father start talking, and a horrible thought pops into Matthew's head as his father turns away from him and towards the woman. Does my dad want a girlfriend? The thought of having to go through the whole Bill thing again, but with his father, scared him. But his problem seemed so small and insignificant when a bag was quickly pushed over his head and a large hand stopped him from screaming and lifted him away. Rock Stanley drove through the curving road all the way to Borden Estate. He was listening to some oldies on the radio. It reminded him of the simpler times back at the orphanage. He heard the kids struggle in the trunk and it sickened him, but he knew he just had to get back to the estate. Maybe Geraldine would praise him this time. That's wishful thinking, he thinks. He just had to get home, then this would all be over. He adjusts his flat cap and turns up the radio. He'd been going back and forth from the playground and the estate for the past couple days, though before today he kept coming home empty-handed. He couldn't this time though, and he knew it. The other day when he came home empty-handed, Geraldine was defecating and called him in. She had the runs bad, and it sounded like, and I quote, "firing an Uzi into a pit of mud." She got up and pointed at the toilet after. She said, "You see that? You're shit." Just like that. You lie there and do nothing. Blood was also in the toilet from her cluster of hemorrhoids bursting during the ordeal. She says next time Rock comes home empty-handed, he will be her personal bidet from then on. Rock felt sick, and this wasn't the first time Geraldine had shown her her nasty side. She killed the maid a few years ago, beat her to death in front of him, something he couldn't forget. However, she recently employed the services of Adolfo Fuchs, a man who was more than happy to be a part of her nefarious plans. Maybe he could take some of the heat, Rock thinks. He thinks to himself, though, he has to forget about them for now. Could he live with himself with what happens to this child? It wasn't right what he's doing, he thinks. "I'm sorry, kid, I really am," he says. But at least he got a bag over his head easy. If this kid was to ever escape, he couldn't see their faces. He knew that at least. He continued driving. As Matthew came to, a gruff voice told him to wake up. Matthew felt himself getting untied, but he still has a bag over his head, his feet dangling off something like a cliff. The voice says, "Count to 20 after I leave and then take the bag off." Matthew cries and says he didn't do anything. The voice says, "I'm not saying you did." Matthew then asks, why is he doing this then? The voice hesitates and says, "It's complicated." Matthew feels the voice felt sad, like he didn't want to do this. But then why is he? Matthew hated that word he said too. Complicated. It's how his parents described the reason they were getting divorced. The voice just says, "Make sure to swing hard. Don't be afraid of the jump. It's your best chance to survive." Survive? Matthew thought. The voice left and Matthew takes the bag over his head off. He looks down, but before he did, he felt it. The fire. Flames licking at his feet. A vat of burning oil beneath him rising up. The only way out? Swinging on the swing set forward and jumping off. The one thing I was never good at, Matthew thought. He swung as hard as he could, but he could only go side to side yet again. He couldn't get any momentum forward on the swing. He felt the heat melting the soles of his shoes, and he panicked more and more as he couldn't go forward. It was too late already. His skin on his hands was fusing to the metal chains of the swing. The heat was too intense. The last thing he thought of was, I wish I could see my mom and dad again. Months later, Penny yelled at her husband and asked, where were you last night? Oh great, a fight was about to start again. Stephanie looked at her younger sister and gave her a comforting smile. She had to be strong for Kayla. Their parents would do this more and more recently. They argued horribly, and Steph put the headphones over her little sister's ears and turned the Walkman on. Just focus on the music, Steph says. Their parents kept arguing about where their father was or her mother leaving the kids alone. Her mother had enough though and grabbed a knife, and her father grabs her hand and twists it and makes her drop it. They had to leave for the day again. Steph knew. She grabbed their bags and they left. Steph didn't cry. She was used to this, all the arguing. They were just going to go to the Boys and Girls Club again, while this cooled down. She had to protect her younger sister Kayla from all of this though. Kayla thought of how thankful she was for her big sister Steph as they walked towards the gym. On the Sony Walkman was the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. The song Hungry Eyes was playing. She found herself lost in the music. She didn't know what kind of love the song spoke about, but she definitely knew what love was, and she was hungry for a different type of love. The love of her parents. She knew enough about love to know that what her parents was doing was not right. She was worried for the day that her mother would finally plunge that knife into her father. Kayla listened to Hungry Eyes and tapped her fingers on her other fingers to the beat. The sign for the Boys and Girls Club came into view. Their membership at this rec center-like place was the only nice thing their parents ever got them. As they got close, a bald black man in a blue tracksuit comes out the front door. Coach Cal, Kayla and Steph say. Hey girls, what are you doing here? He asks. Steph didn't want to say what really happened, so she shyly says, getting some basketball practice in. Kayla and Steph didn't want to tell anyone about their home problems. Not their teachers, not Coach Cal, not their friends. They didn't want to tell people and be outsiders. Coach Cal says, yeah, right here is why Kayla and Steph are going to be great players. They keep practicing. Play to your strengths. Steph says, well, if they're going to be great, it's because they had a great coach. And Coach Cal says, thanks, kid. Steph looks somber, though, and it didn't really matter, though. Even if they are great, it's not like they go into the NBA or anything. Women aren't allowed in the NBA. Coach Cal says, well, maybe one day she'll be so undeniably good that the NBA will let her in. He says that when he first moved to town, there was not a single African-American coach. And maybe he could have stopped trying after he got T-boned by a truck and messed his leg up. But he didn't. He kept going, and now he is the best coach in town. All because he kept with it. Kayla lit up a bit. It's like their emotions and fears about home melted away when Coach Cal talked. Coach Cal smiled and hobbled towards the parking lot, saying he'll be back soon. The girls then go inside the Boys and Girls Club. Teddy and Jasmine were under the bleachers, the only place where they could get any privacy. They were looking over some old books they had just stolen from some guy's car. Teddy looks through and says, it's just a bunch of Nazi crap. Nothing that can give us any money. They wonder if they should go back to the car and steal whatever else the old guy had, but he could come back at any minute, so they just decide against it. They both loved stealing. They actually met when Jasmine tried to steal a set of Pogs from Teddy, and instead of getting mad at her, he offered her to be his partner in crime. They both wanted the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger Pog set, and if you don't know what Pogs are, they were like a 90s toy. They're on the screen right now. Jasmine says that in addition to the Pogs, there's this mixed girl that has a Sony Walkman, and she wants it. Teddy says that they can jump the girl for the Walkman after they jump the short gay slur. They call him a gay slur. In the other corner of the gym, Danny flipped several times and landed flat on the mat. He was becoming a great gymnastics master just like he wanted. He sees Teddy and Jasmine under the bleachers though. Queer! Teddy coughs. Only girls do the splits, Danny! Jasmine yells over. Just then, he saw his friends Kayla and Steph walk in. Hey guys, he shouted out. You guys want to play a round of basketball? Steph says, yeah, they can after she practices her shot. Kayla says that she wants to practice first. They do rock, paper, scissors, and Steph wins. Best 3 out of 5, Kayla asks. Steph says no way. She launches the ball at the hoop, but misses it just barely. Brick! Teddy calls out. Oh boy, here they come. Teddy and Jasmine walk over. You gonna miss again, loser? Jasmine asks to Steph as she sizes her up. Steph says that Jasmine doesn't scare her. Teddy then starts sizing up Danny, and Danny knows that he can't fight Teddy. Leave him alone, I'm high enough to put both of you down. A tall, thick boy walks in the gym. Josh. Alright dude, calm down, Teddy says as Jasmine and him begin walking away. This is Josh. Thanks man, Danny says to the thick boy. The thick boy says, I didn't do it for you, loser. I did it for her. He says, pointing at his crush, Steph. Steph just ignores Josh, and Josh asks if she heard him. And Steph says, yeah, but she doesn't want his help. Danny then takes out a Lunchable and makes this tiny ham sandwich and eats it. Those slap, by the way. Kayla then looks at Josh's new Reebok pump sneakers and calls them cool. Josh says, well, I can get you and your big sister a pair if Steph goes on a date with me. Steph says, ew, no, gross. But Kayla says, Steph, but look at the shoes. But Steph ignores her. Josh tells Kayla to just forget it. Steph thinks she's all that in a bag of chips. Steph says, of course she thinks the Reebok sneakers are cool, okay? But she doesn't care about stolen sneakers. Steph says that everybody knows that Josh is too poor to afford nice sneakers like those. Dirty shirt and pants, but nice sneakers? Yeah, right, Steph says. As she's saying this, a little mouse pops out of Josh's shirt pocket, and Steph says, that's gross, keep that thing away from her. Josh says that this is Polly, his best friend. Kayla says, oh, she's cute and cool, but Steph just says it's gross. Keep that thing away from me, Josh. Josh says, maybe he is poor, but he's not a thief. Steph says, okay, then he got the money for the sneakers selling weed. Josh just looks sad and says, he gets it. He'll leave. Danny turns to Steph and asks, weren't you a little hard on him? He did just save us from Teddy and Jasmine. Steph says her problem with him is that trouble always follows Josh. Sure, Josh saved Danny's butt, but Steph didn't need help. She can take care of herself. Josh doesn't get it. She's not interested. Josh is as dumb as a dog. No, dogs at least get things eventually, unlike Josh, Steph says. She then asks Danny if he wants to play horse after she practices, and he agrees. Adolfo Fuchs stands in the hallway of the Boys and Girls Club, staring into the basketball court. The larger boy bumped past him, and Fuchs notices his Reebok pumps as he does. He looks in and sees the two young girls and a smaller boy playing basketball. They will be perfect, he thinks. He was excited to get started, as his last invention failed when it melted that Matthew kid too fast. Now he has to be perfect. He wanted to make sure the playground in the bowels of the castle would be ready soon enough, but they still needed a trial run beforehand. As he's looking into the basketball court, a tall man in a blue tracksuit comes over and says, what are you doing? Fuchs turns around and says, well, I'm from the Helping Hearts Foundation. I was looking to upgrade some of your equipment next quarter. The old man looked down at the blue man's name tag. Coach Cal, it says. Looks like you're more interested in the kids than the equipment, Cal says. Fuchs says, nonsense. Go ask the lady at the front counter. You will see that we made a rather sizable donation to this facility. Coach Cal says, maybe he will ask her. Fuchs thinks, yes, do that. It will be the last thing you ever do. As he thinks that, he decides it's time to leave. So he heads outside and sees that husky boy in the alley with a small Hispanic boy with a bowl cut. It looked like a drug deal, and Fuchs watched as the bigger boy left and walked into a really gross apartment nearby. Yes, he will do nicely, he thinks. Fuchs returns to his car, but his books are gone. Those were his favorite. They were history books about the Nazi scientists, and he was mentioned a few places in them. It made him feel like a celebrity. He grumbles and thinks, at least the husky boy won't be missed when he takes him. In his apartment, Josh looks at himself in his dirty mirror. He thought about how dumb he was. A pair of sneakers wasn't going to make Steph like him. He got angry and punches a hole in the wall, and he hears squeak, squeak, squeak from his pocket. He apologizes and pulls Polly out. His only real friend, he thinks. Polly never called him poor or was mean to him. They did everything together. Josh pulls out a bag of weed from his pants and throws it on the desk in his room. Just enough for him to hear, Joshua? Called out from the living room. His grandma tells him that a letter came from him today and it's on the counter. He asks his grandma if she can help him learn how to use the washer and dryer. She says maybe in a few days. It's hard for her to move nowadays with all of her illnesses. Joshua says okay, and he goes to the kitchen and grabs the letter. It's from his dad. He hasn't heard from him in 2 years on account of him being in jail. Right as he's about to open the letter, the phone rings. He picks it up and hears a weird slurping noise on the other end. Joshua? It's me, Marco. Joshua says he knows who this is. Why is he calling? He said he'd meet him tomorrow with the stuff. Marco says, no. Do you have anything stronger? Like Coke? Joshua gets angry for a second and then he hears the slurping noise again. What is that noise? He says. Marco says, sorry, it's my retainer. Joshua thinks to himself that this kid is more helpless than him even. Josh says, listen, don't get mixed up with that stuff. It's bad news. Stick with the plan for weed instead. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. at the park. Marco complains that that's after the park closes though, which Joshua says, exactly, idiot, so no one will see us. After which he hangs up and throws the letter from his dad in the trash. Brock finally finished licking the bloody mess of a scab from Gertrude's hemorrhoids. Brock thought to himself, him of all people. Why him? He willingly accepted this punishment though. After the last time with Matthew, he told himself he would not bring any more kids here. He felt disgusted with himself that he let that happen to Matthew, so he will deal with this punishment. Geraldine chastises him and tells him how worthless he is and tells him to pop another of the scabbed over hemorrhoids in his mouth. As he does, she tells him to bite down so she can finish, and he does and is blasted with a horrible taste of blood, feces, and something metallic. Brock, hating his life, then was rode by Geraldine like a bronco. Geraldine finished and thought to herself that, well, at least he's good for something. She'd never say that aloud, but he was good at this at least. She stared down at a picture of her mother, Mildred. She sighed, and thought to herself that if there wasn't a mirror nearby, she would think about her mother when having sex. She missed her mother, but she knew she couldn't dwell on those thoughts though. She had to get going with the meeting with Fuchs. She got up and told Rock to hurry up and get going. She tells Rock to get moving, and they meet Fuchs in the living room drinking a coffee. He says that, unfortunately, it will be another day before it is ready. Geraldine says that he said it was about to be done. What's the holdup? Fuchs says he wants to make it perfect, but gathering children has taken longer than expected. He says he needs Rock's help with an especially big child this time. Geraldine says, of course Rock will help him. Fuchs thanks them and says that everybody else should be easy to get, but this one boy might be a problem. They walk out into the yard and there it is. A giant bouncy castle-like structure with pieces of steel poking out and wooden framing and a bunch of other stuff. It was a monstrosity. Geraldine says that they need to hurry up and finish though. She could drop dead any day now, she's so old. She says she knows that Rock and Fuchs will be lost without her. Fuchs says, do not worry, it will be ready. Fuchs drove up to the Boys and Girls Club with putty on his face to make himself look more youthful. He looked out and saw the boys and girls playing and thought back to his childhood. He wasn't an athletic child. He didn't have many friends, and the only thing he had going for him was his IQ of 155. Boys would beat him regularly, and it would always hurt that he couldn't play with them or make friends normally. One particularly bad day, they beat him really bad, then stripped him of his clothes, after which all the boys drank and pulled a pencil out of his bag and sodomized him with it. They then threw him in the schoolyard with blood running down his legs before the first bell and waited. Fuchs remembered the embarrassment and intense pain he felt with the crowd laughing at him horribly. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was there was no justice for Fuchs. The higher-ups of the school did nothing. Basically said that the boys were just being boys. And from that day onwards in school he was known as Stinkend, which is German for stinky. Eventually, the Nazi party plucked him from college, realizing his genius. Fuchs joined not because he cared about Hitler or his plans, but because he could get revenge on those who had wronged him. Maybe not even just them, but their loved ones too. Their mothers, fathers, wives, husbands. Bastards. Fuchs looked down at the floor at the Lunchables and thought about how disgusting these kind of things were. Taking his mind off the processed food though, he thought about how after the war, Operation Paperclip from the United States brought him into the US's hands. The work wasn't nearly as fun as his work in Germany, but he was still free. Finally though, Geraldine found him, and he at first was skeptical that she could satiate the darkness inside of him, but the torture of children was something he'd never thought he could have experienced, and it was better than expected. It was fulfilling. It truly was the children that did that to him all that time ago. The evil in children was something that needed to be extinguished. Revenge would come. As he's thinking this, two sisters come out of the Boys and Girls Club, and Fuchs thinks, finally. He thought they'd never leave. Kayla and Steph walk out of the Boys and Girls Club confused. Coach Cal never misses practice, they say. Near them in a car, an old man calls out, "Ah, you all right? He had car trouble and wanted to gift you these as a recompense. He wanted to give you these new Reebok sneakers, each of you." Steph and Kayla scream as they can't believe it. Kayla and Steph said, well, they can't stay here long because their parents are expecting them home soon. The man says, of course. I can measure your feet here today and bring you the sneakers tomorrow. He holds up a pair of Reebok pumps to show that he isn't lying and motions them closer. Steph says okay, he knows Coach Cal, so he can't be that bad. But they have to be quick. Steph opens the car doors and sees a spacious back seat. The man tells them to get in, and Steph asks why can't he measure their feet outside the car. But before anyone can say anything else though, the old man pulls out a Luger pistol and points it at both of them. Shut up and get in the fucking car. Marco Estrada stared at his computer screen as he finished his game of Street Fighter. He sighed. The victory isn't as fun when he was alone, but friends didn't come easy to him. He slurped his retainer and put it back in its case and started up Battle Chess instead on his computer, while he takes a swig of Crystal Pepsi, of course. He had moved recently from his school and hadn't made any friends yet. Not that he really had friends in his last school either, though. He looked down at his brown skin and thought, well, that's most likely the reason. Racist assholes in his old school would call him Taco Bitch, and he always felt so alienated. He tried to grab the Crystal Pepsi again and messes up and knocks the whole thing over right into his computer case. I have unfortunately done that with coffee before. Oh no, Marco's dad says as the computer sparks. Him and his dad talk a little bit about friends, and his dad tells him to be more careful next time, okay? He'll buy him a new computer though on account of his new job. Marco thanks his dad and he leaves. He sits back down and thinks, maybe drugs would be the way to make friends. They say they can alter how you think, and maybe that's just what he needs. He says he doesn't want to be the smart, alienated kid anymore. He wants to be average and fun like all the other kids. He saw Josh sell to other kids before, and he needs what he has. He looks out the window and thinks that Josh is his only hope at making friends now. Rock watches the playground a bit later and sees the young Hispanic boy walk in and look around. That must be who Joshua was meeting, he thinks. Fuchs said to leave the other boy alone as he's unneeded, but a terrible thought goes through Rock's head. If this boy was meeting Josh, the boy whom he just abducted with his ridiculous muscle mass, then this boy might wonder where Josh went to. Making a person wonder where one of their abductees went is a problem. He doesn't want any more kids to be hurt by Geraldine though. But then he has a sick thought. Maybe if I get an extra kid, Geraldine will be happy with me, he thinks. Instead of making him go to town on her hemorrhoids, she might even see him as a son and treat him not with disgust, but with love. Real love, like motherly love. Rock goes over and over it in his own head, and then he puts on his mask he has in the passenger seat. I hope you're the winner, kid. I really do, he says as he gets out of his car. Where are Steph and Kayla? Danny thought to himself as he finished up his gymnastics routine. They were never late. He decided to go to the library across the street so he wasn't alone with Teddy and Jasmine again. As he goes in the door, he thinks about how his mom always thinks he's dating the girls he's hanging out with. But he's not. Being friends with girls is just easier to him, he thinks. A lot of guys talk about girls in weird ways, but he certainly doesn't feel like that towards them. If anything, he felt shy and nervous around guys instead. He just wanted some alone time now, though. He goes into the library and picks up a new Goosebumps book and sits down to read it. He feels a man behind him looking at books as he takes out his Lunchable. Pepperoni? I thought Mom packed the ham one today, he said to himself as he brushes past his Power Ranger tube of Pogs in his bag. Oh well, he thinks as he chows down on it. After he gets up, though, he feels really woozy, and then the man who is behind him catches him. My boy, you look sick. Would you like me to help you to the bathroom? Danny agrees as he leans on the man and they start walking. When they get to the door, he realizes this wasn't the bathroom, this was an exit. Not only 2 children from Rock's, but 3 from Fuchs? Well, Rock has been outdone again, Geraldine says as she stares at Rock's puppy dog eyes like he's been defeated. It made her feel good to berate him. She said it took them both long enough to get all those kids, though. She could have dropped dead if they took any longer. But she thinks now, God would pay for making her barren. These children taken from random families are the revenge in which she would exact on God for the horrible mistake. Now she would decide if the children are worthy to live or not. Geraldine puts her fist up and points at the 2 men and says, well, no more waiting. Let's go, you 2. Fuchs stops her and says, just one more night. Can they start tomorrow? Fuchs has a surprise if they wait just this one last night. Geraldine says, fine, one more night. That's it, though. She cannot wait any longer. Fuchs says that in addition to this surprise, he needs to alter the first 2 playground rules for this surprise. It has to do with it. Geraldine says, it better be worth it then, and then they all disperse. Geraldine thinks that one more day, the prototype would be ready. Once it starts, though, it can't stop. The next day, the first thing Kayla heard was, "Don't move." It was the only thing she could hear when she woke up. She felt her ropes being untied, and she could only remember being taken by that old man and then bound and gagged. She remembers sitting on a steel bench for hours, days. The only thing they let her do was go to the bathroom. And now she's in another room with a gag in her mouth and a bag over her head. She didn't know if Steph was even here. Her big sister was the only thing that kept her calm a lot of the time. And the fact that she doesn't know if she's here or not isn't helping this panic feeling. The gruff voice says, "Stay calm and listen carefully." And whoever it was walks away. And then another voice, an old lady that by the sound of it comes over the loudspeaker in the room. She says to take the bag off your head. It's okay. I give you permission. Kayla takes the bag over her head and she can't believe what she sees. They're all sitting on a pink plywood floor with the walls being weirdly inflated. It looked like a bouncy castle. There was a big metal door on one side of the room and a large tunnel that led into nothingness on the other side as far as Kayla could tell. But inside the room, there is 6 other children with bags over their heads as well. The old woman voice tells Kayla to untie everybody and do as you're told. Kayla then heads towards the first person that she sees. As she gets up, she sees a bit more of the room. In another corner of this room was a big yellow coffin with a clock face in the center. Next to it, a glass box with a white rat inside. Polly? Kayla thinks. The old voice tells her to hurry up and don't speak at all. If you do, you'll regret it. Kayla is startled and she takes off the first bag and sees that the first person was Josh. He was crying, and the fact that he looked so scared made Kayla even more frightened. Josh was tough and unmovable. If he was scared, this is serious. The next person she took the bag off of was Danny, and she was happy to see him. They were friends, and she knew Danny. Next, it was a young Hispanic boy with a bowl cut. This was Marco, she thinks. She hardly knows him, but he played basketball with them a few times. After which, it was her big sister. Finally. Kayla took off the bag to see her, and she looked scared but composed. It's just like Steph, she thinks. The look in her eyes made Kayla feel like she was trying to tell her to stay calm. Finally, she went to the last 2 kids, and she wasn't happy to see Teddy and Jasmine, the bullies. Those 2 were the closest to the yellow coffin. Good, you can listen. Now take a look at the box with the rat. That rat represents all of you if you do not follow the rules. You might be thinking that these walls look squishy and you can make a quick exit if you cut them. But let me assure you, the only way is forward. As she says this, everybody looks at Polly in that clear cage, her little chest rising and falling. The separation anxiety of being away from Josh is getting to the poor mouse. Kayla could see Josh trying to get out of his strengths to save Polly, frightenedly, but he couldn't get free of his binds. Kayla thought that maybe she'd be able to help him, but she didn't dare do what she wasn't told. In the inflated walls, it is not air, but gas. Gas that will first slow your breathing, then fill your lungs with blood. Then your skin will come apart and you will bleed from every orifice. Bitch has Nova 6 gas. They all watch as Polly attempts to dodge the purple gas around the clear cage, but eventually the poor white rat was stained red and its tail began to literally melt. It made Kayla sick, but worse than that was the look on Josh's face as his only friend melted pretty much in front of him. Josh had tears rolling down his cheeks as he remembered all the times that Polly was there for him when no one else was. When he cried himself to sleep wondering why his parents didn't love him, Polly was there. He tried to scream curse words, but they were all muffled by his gag. He wondered why these people would do this. He wondered who they were for that matter, and why they wanted him and his friends. Just then, the old lady popped in again, saying, "You might be wondering what this playground is and what's with the metal door. Well, each time you see one of those metal doors, you will be approaching a new playground chamber. They will not open until you finish the challenge in the current playground. This entire place is a series of inflated tubes with metal doors. You must follow the playground rules to complete each room." The old voice then says the rules for this room, as no one can get up. It boils down to going as fast as you can to escape something named Mildred. The voice tells Kayla to free as many people as you can. But remember, time is of the essence. As soon as the old lady finishes that speech, the clock on the yellow coffin shatters, and what came out of it scared Josh to his core. As Kayla was trying her best to undo Steph's bindings, they all saw it. A robot-like thing, a little smaller than a human, but still humanoid in shape. Affixed to its metal frame was rotten skin, a face cut off and stapled to the robot's face. Fetid beef jerky-like breasts and pelvis were also stapled to the robot. Maggots and flies circled this rotten machine. Little white pubic hair stuck out from the pelvis of the robot as well. Josh squirmed hard and fast, trying to get Kayla's attention, but she couldn't notice, so he tries to get Steph's attention as well. And then the robot steps out of the coffin and walks up to Teddy. The tough guy persona the bully had quickly fades when the robot's fingers extend like a walking cane and pierces Teddy's collarbone with pure force, shattering it. The girl shrieked as this happened, and the robot punches Teddy's corpse and his face with extreme force, destroying his frontal lobe in an instant. Josh met Steph's eyes, and Kayla screams that she can't get the bindings off of her. Steph says to take Josh's mouth gag out, and her little sister runs over and does so. Josh quickly says that he has a switchblade in his back pocket. Use it to cut the ropes. She gets the knife out and fiddles with it, and the robot finishes up the pile of meat formerly named Teddy. Josh tells her to quickly grab the metal part of the switchblade and pull. Kayla gets it out and cuts the ropes of Steph and Josh. The robot now grabbing Jasmine and punching her repeatedly too. Then it pulls her legs apart like a kid pulling the legs off a spider. They all whimper, and Josh tells them to get the hell out and throw him the knife. He'll get the others. Kayla and Steph quickly run into the tunnel, and Josh quickly cuts Danny's ropes and he runs too. The robot takes one of Jasmine's dismembered legs and chucks it at Josh, hitting his arm and knocking the knife out of his hand. All he can do is quickly grab Marco and pull his rope as the robot finger extends towards him, but it barely misses and takes out Marco's ear instead. Barely. Barely saved by Josh as he pulls him away. Josh pulls him as far as he can into the tunnel where everybody else already had opened the next metal door. Heavy footsteps close behind as they enter the first metal door together. Two of them already dead from the group. Geraldine covered her mouth and stood up. "Mother," she said, feeling awe and excitement at looking the robot covered in her mother's skin. Fuchs says, "I hope you like the surprise and understand why I needed more time now." He hopes that the surprise is worth it, he says. Geraldine paid him no mind as she reminisced about her mother and her sexual feelings towards her, and then how she died, and Geraldine kept the body of Mildred Borden in her freezer. She remembered the time when she first brought Fuchs on board to her estate and how he helped her try to conceive a child, though she was not interested in the men that she was experimenting with. No, she only had sexual thoughts of her own mother. She had an idea around that time. She made Rock go to the private lot where her mother was buried and dig her up. Geraldine cut her mother's corpse into pieces and stored them in the freezer. Then, whenever she wanted to have sex with her mother again, she would dethaw the pelvis and head. She would put the pelvis on the bed and the head looking at her. That way she could eat her mother's dead asshole while her head stared at her. It was the best orgasm she's ever had since her mother was alive. Fuchs discovered this one day and then made a sex robot with the corpse to impress Geraldine. He made this robot and it worked for a time, until the body started to rot. Fuchs gave her a lotion to rub on the robot to cover the smell, but that's all it did, covered the smell. The robot once grinded on her and maggots fell all over her festering private parts and into Geraldine's mouth, along with some pelvic skin. Some of the maggots made their way down Geraldine's throat, and even though Geraldine was into a lot of sick things, she hated bugs. This pissed Geraldine off so much that she almost had Rock kill Fuchs, but she needed him to make the playground, even if he did take away from her the one sexual pleasure she had. Eventually, though, she calmed down and made Rock make a room of mirrors for her so she could examine herself from every angle while touching herself. Back in the present, Geraldine says, "The robot's a nice surprise, Fuchs." Although she didn't personally want to ever see the robot again, it's nice that Fuchs reprogrammed it to have fun with the kids. "Consider yourself redeemed, Fuchs," she says as she turns to Rock. And she says, "Maybe one day Rock will be redeemed too," as she spits on the ground near him. As they look at the cameras, they see Jasmine with her leg torn off twitch slightly. Geraldine asks, "Is she still alive?" Fuchs says, "Maybe, actually, yes. No life should go to waste now, should it?" All the kids try to take solace in one another. Kayla asks Steph why they killed Teddy. Why, Steph? Doing everything to keep her composure, Steph says she doesn't know. Josh, rattled, says, "Does it fucking matter?" Danny tries to comfort them all, but realizes he's just as shaken himself. They all look at the clock on the wall, and Josh says they have 15 minutes for the next chamber. Shit. That's all the time they have to rest. Kayla asks once again, why are they doing this? But Danny says it doesn't matter why. His outburst somehow calms Marco, though. He's not used to being the leader, usually the nerdy and smart one, but this time his life's on the line. He knows he needs to bring them all together. Marco shouts, "Okay, listen up. I may not be tough or strong, but I'm pretty good at figuring out puzzles. This is a game to them, and I'm pretty damn good at games. I was scared in that last room too, but we need to keep a cool head, so shut up and listen up." Josh, seeing this young boy's determination, says, "Yeah, he likes that." They all look at the next playground's rules. It says that the kids need to eat their breakfast to grow up big and strong, but the prize at the bottom was them all along. They all discuss what the hell does that mean as they walk forward. As they get closer to the next room, a rancid smell perforates their nostrils. They get there and Danny says, "Gross," as they see a big transparent huge bowl, which was filled with what appeared to be curdled milk. There were also 4 slightly raised platforms with boxes of cereal with an image of a boy swinging on it and a fire below him melting his flesh. Inside each box there's a prize, all the boxes said, along with playground puffs at the top of it. In addition to these things, there was a giant box of playground puffs in the room too, like big enough to fit a body. It was the exact same as the small ones, but the word prize was missing from it. Kayla says she's scared, and all of them began to panic when Josh says to shut up and let Marco think. Marco looks in the bowl of curdled milk and he thinks he sees a pink letter at the bottom or something. Marco spots a snorkel nearby and he thinks he gets it. He takes the goggles and puts them on and dips his hand in the disgusting milk, and thankfully, it was just in fact curdled milk. It smelled awful, but it wasn't dangerous. He gets in and tries to reach the bottom without going under, but to no avail. He knows what he has to do. He has to dive down into the milk and grab it. "What are you doing?" Josh asks, and Marco takes his clean arm and takes the snorkel out of his mouth for a second and says, "I'll be right back." He dives down and soon realizes there's a catch here. As he dives into the curdled rotten milk, clouding his goggles, he realizes the straw attached to the snorkel was strategically too short. As he went deep under the rotten milk, the clumpy, disgusting milk entered his breathing tube and went down his throat. He grabs the object and tries to resurface fast. He was gonna vomit, which was going to make it impossible to breathe, even more with vomit exploding out of his nose. He resurfaces, and everybody asks is he okay, but he was just thankful to get out of the disgusting porridge. He vomits all over. He ran the pink object to the big box and puts the big pink Z in the prize area. 4 letters left, he thinks. Then he looks around the room and gets it. There are 4 other boxes. Marco takes charge and says, "For the other letters of prize will be in those boxes. We need to go grab them." The other children all go to the box and realize that the boxes are actually steel and filled with blood. Kayla winces and says she doesn't want to put her hand in there, but Steph says, "Don't be scared. It's just like when Kayla helped her out with a bloody nose at the Boys and Girls Club." They all reached in their respective boxes and found the P, R, I, and E. They all put them into the prize area, and to their surprise, the playground rules that said you were the prize all along was true. As the front of the giant playground box opened like a door, and inside there was a young boy crying and shivering. It looked like the boy that was the logo on the boxes, but his face was half burned off and covered in welts. Unrecognizable to be a child, but he was alive. His fingers melted together from the heat. His charred body must have made breathing even hard for him. He looked like a monster. This is the halfway point of the book, and then it has a weird mock ad for playground puffs, and it has this image on it, which is what I assume all the boxes of cereal looked like, and then it starts up after this. As Fuchs was working, he listened to a track on the Walkman, Hungry Eyes. He had never really enjoyed American pop music, but this song was strangely attractive to him. He had never really felt a woman's love, but this track made him feel sort of sad. He liked it though. The past few days he had been playing this song on repeat. Geraldine taps his shoulder and asks, "What are you listening to?" He says, "The Dirty Dancing soundtrack. I quite fancy it." Geraldine, sort of confused by his response, just asks, "Alright, what's up next?" Fuchs shows her the monitor where a sort of body cam shows up. Fuchs explains that the burned boy, Matthew, is fitted with both a vest with a camera and a speaker, as well as he has an earpiece in. He then holds up a remote with a microphone. He explains that not only can Geraldine use this boy as a speaker and a camera, but she can also talk directly into his ear, so that only he can hear her. Geraldine confusedly asks, which boy is this? Where did he come from? Fuchs explains that this is the boy from months ago, the one in the swing that effectively melted. Rock convinced Fuchs to save this boy, because perhaps he would be useful. Months of nursing back to health later, here he is, Matthew. He has been begging to see his parents again, over and over while he recovered. So much so that Fuchs promised him that he could if he followed all of his commands. Think of him like a toy soldier marching to your own drum, Fuchs says to Geraldine. Geraldine smiles and says she doesn't even know how to thank Fuchs. Then surprisingly, she thanks Rock as well, saying he's been more and more useful lately as well. Rock nods and Fuchs agrees. Matthew tells all the other kids his name, and they begin questioning him on what happened and if there's a way out. But Matthew just screams every once in a while for no reason. Steph says, asking him questions is a waste of time, it appears. He doesn't seem ready for it anyway. Steph felt sick looking at this boy's burnt body, though. They all look at Matthew and ask, what's that weird vest he's wearing? It looks weird. But as they ask, the clock rings out. Time's up for this room. They say they have to keep moving or the Mildred robot will catch up. They enter the next room and close the iron door behind them. Matthew keeps letting out little yips, his body feeling small bits of phantom pain from the fire. Steph looks at him in both disgust and pity. They explain the situation to him as they enter the next room, about the Mildred robot chasing them and killing 2 of them already. They look up at the next playground rules and notice it says Part 1 under it this time. They all question it, but Josh just says maybe this room is bigger or longer or something. The rules say to choose 1 child to defeat the flow. Steph thinks back to her conversation with Coach Cal outside the Boys and Girls Club. He told her to play to her strengths, Steph says. But we don't even know what the challenge is yet. Let's see what it is, and whoever has the best strengths should do it. Everyone seems to agree. They continue around a bend in the hallway and see their next trial. On one side of the room's hallway, it is a rusted spike wall all over. And on the other side, very large fans spinning slowly. In the center, a trap door, and just above it, Jasmine dangled from a colorful jump rope. They all try to suppress their cries at the ghastly sight of the broken body of Jasmine, her broken and disfigured, sputtering and clinging to life. But before they can say anything, though, one of the fans spins at such an extreme speed that Jasmine's body was nothing more than a piece of paper in the wind as she wildly slams into one of the spikes. They all start screaming and Josh yells at them to all stop. They can't freak out. It's nearly impossible, he knows, but if they're going to get out of here alive, they all need to calm down. Everyone actually did start to calm down and listen. Even Steph began seeing him as not a dirty boy from the Boys and Girls Club and started seeing him as a guy who needed to be listened to right now. Josh says that Steph was right. They need to play to their strengths. But no one has ever been in a position even nearly close to this before. Are those jump ropes? Denny says, pointing at the end of the hallway. They'd been too distracted by the bloody massacre of Jasmine's body to notice, but at the end of the wall were 2 jump ropes mechanically made to do a double Dutch-like motion. However, they weren't made of plastic, but razor-sharp steel. Play to our strengths, right? Steph says, as they all notice a big red button at the end of the hallway. It's not about who is best at it, it's about who has the best chance of surviving it. Danny says he can't do it, he feels sick. Caleb then holds up her hand and says, look! She was snapping to a rhythm. The fans were turning on and off in a rhythm, and Kayla notices it. Kayla says, she can do this. It's to the rhythm of Hungry Eyes, the song. How did you know that? Marco says. Steph says, no, you're not doing this, Kayla. Kayla is not doing this. Normally she'd let her do it. If it was just the fans and the spikes, she'd let her do it, but at the end, there's those razor-sharp jump ropes, too. Kayla says that Steph knows that she is as good as anybody at jump rope. She can do this. Besides, someone has to. Tears well up in Steph's eyes. Her little sister was so brave. Braver than her, even. She wonders if all the violence at home had hardened her little sister. Okay, Steph says with tears in her eyes as she realizes that the roles have been reversed. Kayla was now protecting Steph. Kayla was ready, and Steph thinks she's never been more serious or more scared. Kayla starts jumping across the fans to the beat of Hungry Eyes, and does it flawlessly until she gets to the center with the trap door. She eyes it for a second when thinking she might be able to escape through the trap door, but she can never leave the rest of them. As she does, with the last of her strength, Jasmine grabs at Kayla's foot, saying, help me. And then she dies. This startles Kayla so bad and she hesitates. They all yell for her just to run, forget the pattern. She does so and flawlessly clears the rest of the fans, and everyone is panicking, but she double dutches perfectly over the razor-sharp jump ropes as well, as if guided by angels. And she clears it. Except, as soon as she jumps to safety, one of the jump ropes catches her ponytail, which apparently is also electrified, and zaps her, causing her to fall to the ground, motionless. Back in the monitor room, Fuchs remarks that was impressive. Rock felt himself get more and more depressed watching this. He hated that he had to go and pick up that mostly dead girl and put her in the room at Fuchs's request. As Rock looks at the dried blood on his fingers, he remembers how at the orphanage no one ever picked him. Even among the orphans, no one wanted him. It's the reason he's so strong and big. Even when nobody wanted Rock, the weights he lifted always did. That was quite impressive, Geraldine rang out. They looked at the screen with attention. Rock thinks that he's not like those two either, though. Geraldine yelled into the radio for Matthew to keep the damn camera still. She then says she wonders if that girl is, and I quote, a retard after getting shocked near her brain like that. Fuchs says he doubts it. It only struck her hair. Rox thinks to himself that these people are all he knows, though. What can he do? All the children called out to Kayla at the end of the hallway. Well, all of the children except for Matthew. Danny notices as Matthew doesn't seem to care at all, and he pulls out a yo-yo and starts talking to himself as he yo-yos. As he does, Kayla gets back up and says, she's okay. Danny yells for her to push the button. She does so, and the fans and the jump ropes stop. She did it, Marco called out. All the kids walk past the body of Jasmine, and Danny thinks about how those two would jump him and take his toys and such before. He takes out his Power Ranger pogs and puts them on Jasmine's body. They're for you. And Teddy, he says somberly. Their petty differences didn't seem so big here. They continued on. Matthew checked the trap door and it was locked anyway. Figures. He puts his yo-yo in his back pocket. Danny wonders why he feels so uneasy around Matthew. Maybe it was just because he'd never met him before and knew everybody else. They reached Kayla and Steph hugged her. Kayla says she told Steph she could do it. Steph cries and says, you did. You did. Marco says he doesn't mean to interrupt this, but they found the second half of the playground rules. They round the bend to the second half of the room where two soccer goals were positioned across a ledge. Near it were two Skippits, which if you don't know what a Skippit is, it's on the screen right now. They used to be pretty popular. Danny felt his heart sink. He knows he's good at these. Him and Steph used to play with them all the time in the gym. The rules state that once you feel the blade of the Skippit 10 times, you have to launch it at the goal or get blown up. Danny immediately understands what this means. The inside of the Skippit, the part where you put your leg, there was a circular razor blade. If you were to spin it around your leg, it would cut it to the bone. Steph looks at Danny and says, you know this has to be me and you, right? Danny complains, but Steph asks, has anyone else used a Skippit before? Kayla raises her hand, but Steph says it's her turn to protect Kayla now. Danny asks, why can't Matthew do it? He hasn't done anything yet. Which, by the way, neither have you, Danny. Steph says that everyone has to play to their strengths. This is Danny's strength. Danny curses himself for ever picking up that toy. Danny asks, is there at least a way to mitigate the damage to their legs? Josh says, well, they can put their shirts on the inside of the razor. Maybe it would lessen the cut. They agreed, and Kayla says, but wait, what about the... Steph says, no more waiting. And they get going. They start jumping over the Skippit, and the razor blade cuts into the shirt on the first revolution and already causes Danny to bleed by the 6th revolution. He felt horrible pain in his leg, but he continued. By the 9th revolution, Danny screamed in pain, blood splurting from his leg, and when they got to 10, they both fling their bomb Skippits into the goals. But Steph's bounces out, and they both slip on Danny's blood as they try to run away from the explosive Skippits. And they fall there in the line of the explosion. Josh quickly runs over as if he wanted to get blown up himself, and drags them both by their neck around the bend to safety. I gotcha, Josh says as he does. The metal chamber containing the explosion. And somehow this did not blow up the bouncy castle walls, by the way, and they were safe. They all checked over each other and they were all more or less okay. Besides Danny's leg, of course. Josh looks at it and says, yeah, that looks pretty bad. Geraldine puts her head to her hands in anger. How did they get past that? She says, and then, I quote, I would have preferred if that little queer boy didn't make it, she says as she grabs the remote and talks to Matthew. "Listen here, you worthless piece of fucking garbage," she says in his ear. Rock hated that. He hates that word. Worthless. A word Geraldine had used to describe him many times. All she does is break people down, Rock thinks. Rock was the one who cleaned that boy's wounds, wiped his ass, listened to him babble about his parents. Despite how tedious it was, Rock was grateful to help that boy. Maybe he'll be the one that escapes, he thinks. Geraldine continues over the radio. "Remember our promise, boy. If you want to see your parents again, do exactly as we say. Turn left if you understand." The boy spins around in a circle to the left. "Not that much," Geraldine says. "Boy, is he not bright," Fuchs mutters. On the screen, they see Josh rip off a fan blade from the previous room and use it as a stint for Danny's leg. Geraldine points at the screen and says to Fuchs, "See? That boy looks dumb, but he's actually very smart." Fuchs agrees and says, "But look who's returned," pointing to a different monitor. Mildred the robot had broken open the door when the explosions went off, masking the sound. The children are in grave danger. Matthew stopped spinning and thought to himself that he'd do anything to see his home and his parents again. But would these people that captured them and hurt them all so much actually let him go, he wondered? They said they would the entire time he was recovering, but he never saw any of their faces. He asked to play along, even if it's just for a chance, he thinks. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy, like that guy on TV he used to watch. Matthew saw Josh make the splint, and Danny asks, how did he know how to do that? Josh says, well, once his father and his uncle went into the woods with him. His father and uncle got lost, and they came back, and his uncle had broken his leg somehow, and his dad had made a splint out of a tree. That's how Josh learned how to do that. They were doing cocaine and stuff in the woods when it happened. He locked eyes with Marco and says, like I said, cocaine's bad stuff. Steph says that Josh's dad actually sounds like a smart guy. Josh says he doesn't know. He never saw him again after that day. His dad got arrested then. Steph looked sad that she even brought it up, but Josh says he's numb to the story at this point. Besides, he's too preoccupied with his own survival right now. As they talk, Matthew stops them all and says, guys? He screams out, pointing at the end of the hallway. The Mildred robot was rolling towards them fast. They all quickly rush to the next door and open it. They all make their way quickly inside, but Josh slips in, and as he does, Mildred's fingers scratch his back really bad. He slips through the door and barely makes it. They all make it through, and Josh seems more or less okay. He says the scratches on his back aren't that deep. Steph grabs him and looks at his back, and he slightly winces but laughs and says, it grips like a pair of pliers. They all laugh. The voice in Matthew's head yells at him, scream, scream now. Scream now or I'll give you something to scream about. Matthew immediately screams, and everyone is startled. They ask, what are you screaming about? What's wrong? He says he's just scared. They all comfort him, and Geraldine comes into his head and says, get a good shot of the girl. Matthew then turns to the girl, and then they go into the next room and read the next playground rules. It says, make 2 baskets, or the blade will drop. They all say they don't like the sound of that one. They all turn the bend, and they see it. Kayla and Steph immediately scream. Matthew didn't know the black man in the blue tracksuit, but he assumed that Kayla and Steph did know who it is. Coach Cal! They scream out. A loudspeaker rings out of the room saying that if they move from that spot, the guillotine will come down and chop off Coach Cal's head. They have to make 2 free throws, and it's all over. For now. The 2 girls break down, and Matthew thinks, well, that's what this place does to you. Kayla screams out, please don't hurt Coach Cal. And Geraldine says, that's up to your sister. I know you can do this, Steph, Josh says. He's seen her make this free throw at the Boys and Girls Center several times. Steph appreciated his kind words, but she couldn't stop shaking. Coach Cal had a gag in his mouth, and Danny says, hey, I don't mean to rush you guys, but the clock is ticking. Steph thinks Danny's right. She has to calm down. Steph says she's made this free throw 1,000 times. But then she thinks, how many times has she missed it? She couldn't look in Coach Cal's horrified eyes. The thought of his life in her hands rattled her to the core. So she closes her eyes and steels her nerves. When she reopens them, she focuses on the rim. And as she goes to shoot, she flicks her arm the wrong way due to something. Matthew screams the second she releases it. The arc felt perfect anyway, though. But it hit the rim, and as it was in the air for a second, it felt like a lifetime to Steph. A lifetime of her and Coach Cal helping each other out, him coaching them and being a great role model. a father figure better than her own dad. Most of the time, he was just a distraction from her home life, and that was better than anything. As the ball fell from its arc, she knew that time was over. Steph screamed like she was the one that was dying. After all, she felt Coach Cal was a part of her anyway, as the guillotine slices down with a clunk. Steph notices that there's no basket for this guillotine, but instead a curved piece of wood that brought the head right down to them. Coach Cal's head slides right before Steph. She vomits and cries all at once over the head of her role model. Josh screams at Matthew. "Why the fuck did you do that?" Josh wanted to wring his throat, and Matthew says he just screamed. He's messed up in the head now. Ever since he was burned, he keeps screaming. Josh throws the kid aside and comforts Steph. He hated seeing her upset. The speaker rings out.
"I hate to interrupt you, but the playground rules state you need to make 2 free throws. You have 2 minutes to take Cal's body down and strap your sister in for the next one."
Steph screams horribly, saying, "No, please!" Josh looks at Marco, and a silent understanding happens between the two of them, where they walk up to Coach Cal's body and respectfully take him down. Kayla starts to walk up to the guillotine, and Steph cries and reaches for her, but Kayla had already accepted her fate. Kayla says, "It's okay. You never miss a free throw twice, right? Besides, if you don't do this, we all die." The speaker rings out once again.
"Oh, I forgot to tell you. You won't be using a basketball for this free throw. You'll be using your coach's head."
A silence filled the room, as no one objected. They couldn't. Steph picked up Coach Cal's head and studied the weight as it was covered in vomit and blood. Josh looked at her and finally figured out why he had a crush on her. She was so real. She never conformed to anyone, and when the world hit her, she hit back harder.
20 seconds left,
Geraldine rang out, and as those seconds dwindled, Steph lobs the ball up, all with Matthew screaming once again as she does it, and it effortlessly sails right into the hoop. Coach Cal's teeth getting stuck in the net as it swishes. It looked like, for one final time, that he smiled at them. "That bitch!" Geraldine says to Fuchs and Rock. "How did she do that?" Rock smiles to himself as Geraldine threw this tantrum. She says she has half a mind to let Mother loose through the door, but Fuchs interrupts her and says, "Well, what about the rest of the rooms, though?" He says maybe she's just a talented kid, but no amount of talent will let them go through the next room unscathed. They begin talking about Matthew, and Rock feels like he's different from these two. He doesn't enjoy watching this pain, he hates it. But at the same time, he feels he's no better than these two either. Geraldine asks, what if Matthew dies though? Their camera will be gone. Fuchs says that that's what happens when you play a game with a wild card. If worse comes to worse, we can put the earpiece on another child. Geraldine smiles at the thought of this backup plan. Everyone had thrown up a bit at that point, especially Marco. And as they made it to the next room, he thought to himself that the odds aren't in their favor here. Coach Cal's death most likely isn't the last one he'll see today. He looks up at the next room's sign of playground rules. It says to keep your body on the correct color or you'll get a squirt, whatever that means. They get to the next room and they see it. About 12 twister mats and a super soaker positioned above each of them. Normally, Marco would be happy to see a super soaker, but this made more sense now when it said a squirt. It probably wasn't water in those things.
Take your places. You will have 2 minutes to follow the rules. If your hand slips or you fall off the mat, well, I guess that's that,
Geraldine says over the speakers. All the children get on their respective pads and the game begins with a robotic voice calling out.
Left foot, green.
Marco followed this instruction as well as everybody else. They all did it easily. Marco tries to calm himself down by thinking he can do this. He's good at games.
Right foot, blue. Left hand, red. Right hand, red.
They all followed with ease until someone called out and broke all of their concentration. "I should have taken the stint off before we started," Danny said, and everybody looked at him. Normally, someone of his gymnastic prowess should easily be able to do this, but since he was injured, and with what happened in the last room, everybody was off their game. Steph calls out, "Just survive 1 more minute." "I'm losing it," Danny calls out, but before he even finishes that sentence, the hiss of the water gun rings out, and it sounds like Danny screams so hard that his vocal cords begin to bleed. He spasms on the floor, and as he does, a piece of his stint slices the wall near Kayla. Danny writhes on the ground, now with just a skeletal mass of bone and blood where his face used to be. The super soaker had hit him in the face. 30 seconds, Steph called out as Kayla screams that the gas is getting closer to her. But the 30 seconds was too long for Kayla. The gas had entered her lungs and paralyzed her, and as she drops from the mat, the super soaker blasts the young child in the chest.
Time's up.
The robotic voice calls out. They all rush to Kayla, her chest sizzling and wide open, several organs melted into bloody sludge. Steph cries horribly at the deaths of both Danny and her little sister, but Marco screams out they need to go. Not only is Mildred close, gas is now filling the room. Steph wails and reaches for her sister as she's carried away by Marco and Josh. Marco thinks that he didn't know those two like Steph did. He can't even imagine. But he knows he would have liked to have been their friends in a different world. Both Kayla and Danny were gone. In the kitchen, Rock was putting together some cheese boards and was tormented by the thought of the children he just watched die on the monitor. He couldn't share in the pleasure like Fuchs and Geraldine. He wasn't like that. This was incomprehensible. He knows he has to stop this though. But he can't, because this is the only life he knows. He has to think his way out of this. He has to manipulate Geraldine and Fuchs to let them go somehow. But Rock was never that smart. He was always the one being manipulated, not doing the manipulating. He tried to think of something, anything to sway them as he headed back to the monitor room. But coming up with a sound piece of logic to sway psychopaths was no easy feat. Think, dummy, think, he thinks as he re-enters the room. In the next chamber, Steph cries into Josh's ripped shirt. Everyone was trying to console her, but how can you console somebody that just lost everyone they loved? The old woman whispers in Matthew's ear as this was happening.
Get them moving if you want to see your parents again.
Matthew wondered if he would actually see his parents again. They keep telling him that, but he wonders if it's even true. Guys, we should keep moving, Matthew says coldly, but no one even looked at him. Guys, shouldn't we read the next set of rules? Josh then gets up and pushes Matthew, saying, why, do you know something we don't? You haven't helped at all. Better yet, you've actually hurt us. You're the only reason Coach is dead. Josh cocks his fist back and Marco tries to stop him, but before he could, Matthew was already on the ground reeling. Marco goes over to Matthew, but Matthew gets up on his own and cries on the other side of the room. Marco goes to Josh and says, he said the screams were an accident. We need to stick together here. There are less of us now. He's right about one thing. We need to read the next set of rules. Josh simmers down and says, yeah, okay. Steph says through tears that they aren't going to get out anyway. It's over. Marco just begins reading the rules, as he has noticed that the timer has less time on it than all the others. They have to keep moving. The rules say that before you bounce, you have to solve a puzzle. Then after, you have to go down the ramp with the pogo stick and choose a route. And then after that, some dodgeball. Quite a long set of rules this time, Marco thinks. Next to the rules was bike racks with pogo sticks locked in them. And next to that was a chessboard. They looked around and tried to unlock the pogo sticks, but like it said, no luck. Marco calls out that they have to solve the puzzle before they get the pogo stick, and he walks over to the chessboard. He knows battle chess, he can figure out this code. There's a place to enter a code there, but under it, a small rhyme. It says, I am one word, spell me out and advance. Only the king and rook can do my dance. As Marco reads it aloud, the clock rings immediately and the door opens with Mildred coming in. Shit! Josh says as he rushes to the door to try to keep Mildred out. He holds the door shut as best as he could. Castling, Marco says out loud. A chess move that can only be done by a rook and a king to protect the king. Marco punches in the code to the chessboard and the pogo sticks unlock. They all run to the pogo sticks, but Steph calls out, what about Josh? As they all look back, Josh was now on the ground, with Mildred about to stomp all over his chest, her rotten face with blood from the other two on it. Marco thinks back to the time earlier when Josh saved him in the first room. Marco knew he wasn't strong enough to stop this robot, but he had to try. Josh would have done the same for him. Marco takes out a pogo stick and whacks it at Mildred in the head right before she can stomp on Josh, and Marco says, hey, robo bitch! And yes, he actually says that, as you can see right here. Mildred then turns around and stabs Marco in the stomach with her long fingers and lifts him so he's eye level with her. Mildred squeezes Marco's stomach until it bursts. Bits of bile, blood, and rotten milk from earlier spill out all over her fingers as Marco bleeds out. As Marco's pain gets greater, so does his determination. He sees a circuit board in her mouth, the same kind that his computer had the other night when he fried it with that liquid. She opened up her mouth and a drill came out to stab him right through the head with it, and as it whirs up, Marco says the incredibly cheesy line, "This is battle chess, not checkers." And he spits his retainer into her mouth, and it short-circuits the motherboard, and she drops Marco as the robot begins to stop working. Mildred's head explodes, and Josh gets up and holds Marco's hand. Josh says, "No!" And Marco weakly says, "You saved my life earlier." Josh says, "That's what friends do." Marco laughs and says, "Friends." He says to Josh one last sentence. He says he's happy he got to talk to Josh over the phone that last time. Geraldine cries as her mother's robot head explodes. Her relationship with her mother flashed through her head. The old wrestling matches she had with her when she was a kid, her bloody pad that Geraldine loved to touch, the feces that Geraldine took out of the toilet and touched herself with and ate, and her last moments, smothering her mother with her own butt. She cries, but says, "I guess this was for the best." She really gave him hell, though. Fook says, "That it was, that it was." Geraldine says that she will live on in these next few challenges. She loved her mother. She was the main reason she started writing poetry, even. She will live on through Geraldine. Josh pogo-sticked away from Marco's body to the first platform while screaming, "Fuck, fuck, 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 fuck!" as he did. He got there and pounded the ground with tears in his eyes. Steph hugged him on the ground. Josh didn't know Marco well, but this trauma had made them all bond. He thought about that phone call that Marco talked about in his dying breaths. The one the other night when he asked for cocaine. Josh thought he could have gotten Marco cocaine. He'd done it for other people, but at the time he didn't know why he told Marco he wouldn't. Now he realizes it was because he wanted to protect Marco. Steph then says she's so sorry. She's sorry for treating him so badly at the Boys and Girls Club. All the stuff about him being poor or dirty or a thief. She says she was scared of him because sometimes he got that look in his eyes that her parents used to get. She's scared that she has that same look in her eyes sometimes too. She says if this is her last day on Earth, she's happy she gets to spend it with a sweet guy like him. She then pecks Josh on the cheek and holds his hand. Josh says it's no one else's last day. He'll make sure of it. He turns to Matthew, who had been standing aside for the two to talk, and says, "Marco wanted us to work together. I'm going to honor his last request." Steph held his hand as they came to the next part of the room. It was 3 slip-and-slides going down towards 3 doors made of cardboard, each going in different directions. On each side of each slip-and-slide there was black, though, as if they'd fall into oblivion if they fell off. Josh recalled the playground rules from earlier and got ready. The 3 survivors waited at their respective slip-and-slides. Steph wanted to just get it over with, but they thought about it, and with no Mildred chasing them now, realistically, they could just wait here for the police. They figured a plan this convoluted would have taken police into account. They won't be coming. Besides, they all wanted to go down the slip-and-slide. They all decided that they were going to go, and they counted down and leapt. It was easier than expected, and they all respectively burst through their cardboard doors at the end of their slip-and-slides. It resulted in a free fall, but at the bottom was a trampoline or a rubber mat or something on the floor, so they just bounced. Steph and Matthew hit first, but Josh had a little extra something behind his door. Barbed wire. He landed too, but the wire was stuck in his shoulder and bleeding heavily. He says, "Don't worry about him, they need to get to the next door." There was a metal door raised slightly, and when they got up to it, it was locked. The intercom flicked on, and Geraldine says,
"It's not going to be that easy. Across from you, there are 5 buttons. Press all of them and the door will unlock, and you can leave. But you should hurry so you don't get hit."
As they run for them, a large carbon fiber sphere comes hurling down the slip and slide as well. So heavy that when it hits the bottom, it bounces and hits a wall, and it's propelled the other direction and went hurtling towards all 3 of them. They make it to the first 3 buttons and they easily press them. Steph and Josh ran to the side to hit the other buttons, but before they managed to, a second ball comes down and hits Josh, springing off the barbed wire momentarily, but as if by pure chance, the other ball and this ball collide right after, with Josh in the middle, with a thunderous crack as they hit each other, after the buttons were pushed. Steph cries out a blood-curdling scream and runs to Josh as the balls finally slow down. His chest was effectively caved in. "No, don't you fucking leave me too!" Josh tries to talk, but only blood and phlegm come up. He barely manages to get out the incredibly corny line, You really are all that and a bag of chips. Watch over my grandma for me. As he slumps over and passes away from his injuries. Steph cries out, and the thought of her mother flicked in her head. She had kept the darkness at bay for Kayla and then for Josh, but now there was nothing left for her. They were both gone. She'd lost this day. Rock found himself thinking that this was it. They're all dead, and the ones that aren't were now unsavable. He wondered if karma was real, or worse, if God was real. Would he have to answer for his crimes someday? Geraldine cackles. I can't believe it. What are the odds of the boy being crushed between the balls? Fook says it is quite marvelous. And it's even better that there's only 2 remaining. The perfect amount for the final chamber. Geraldine says, that's wonderful. Then, surprisingly, she pats Rock's leg and says, you've done a good job this time, Rock. Rock felt that this was good. It'll be easier to manipulate her if he's on her good side. Geraldine takes out the radio and tells Matthew to head for the next chamber with Steph and be ready. She then says after this is all over, she has a grand idea for the next set of children and the true playground in the coming years. Which, by the way, this is referencing the first book, obviously. Geraldine says that after today, she will continue to break God's chosen, the fertile. He will regret the day that he made Geraldine barren. Rock looks at his monitor and sees Steph, now broken. He understands as he sees himself in the little broken girl. They're both broken. Fook says that Rock and him are fortunate to be by Geraldine's side for the next time, too. Rock thinks to himself, yeah, next time. Next time, he's gonna stop the whole thing. Matthew tries to force Steph into the next room, but she didn't want to move. She didn't want to leave Josh's side. He was all that was left of her, and Matthew could see that. She was broken, no longer having any will to live. Matthew drags her into the next room, and it's different. There was no colorful walls or playground-like things. It was cold and intimidating. Should we read the rules? The burnt boy asks Steph, but she remains silent. Geraldine comes over the loudspeaker and says,
don't bother. I'll read them for you. Just go to the table at the center of the room and put one of your hands in the holes on either side.
Matthew goes over and looks at the table. It looks like a machine covered in cloth. He thinks that he can do nothing but listen now. So he goes in and puts his malformed hand inside the hole. It felt like there was something metal inside this table. Steph walked to her side but said nothing and did nothing. Geraldine comes over the loudspeaker and says,
this is the final chamber. Little girl, you have a 50-50 chance to walk out of this whole ordeal alive after this one room. However, if you don't put your hand inside the hole, neither of you will walk out alive. There's an air vent above you with that same gas that killed your little sister in it. If you don't put your hand in, you will die the same pathetic way as your sister.
Then to Matthew's surprise, Steph weakly puts her hand in. No sadness on her face. It's just blank. Geraldine says,
wonderful. Now I will read the final playground rules.
But before she does, a sharp pain enters Matthew's fingers as a drilling noise rings out. He screams and looks at Steph, who doesn't do anything. The cloth on top of the machine table is lifted and he now can see inside. It's a glass table. Several screws have been inserted into his fingers as well as Steph's. Even more worrying, 3 items were also inside the clear table. An industrial paper cutter, a large rock, and a pair of rusty scissors. Sweat drops off Matthew's brow as Geraldine reads off the last rules.
Rock, paper, scissors. Best of 5. That's it. Whoever wins will choose who survives.
All of a sudden, a fire burns in Steph's eyes. If I live, I'll make sure you don't, old woman. Geraldine laughs through the speaker and says,
let's not get ahead of ourselves.
And then she says,
Matthew, point the camera directly in your hands. No cheating.
Though she doesn't say this through the earpiece, but over the loudspeaker, purposefully so Steph could hear. You've been recording for her? Matthew said he had to. Geraldine continues over the speaker.
More than that, he does whatever I say. Like that scream when your coach died. I say jump, and little Matthew asks, how high?
Steph's eyes lit up like a fire was put under her. A devilish rage filled her. You told Josh and Kayla it was an accident. Geraldine comes back over the speaker and says,
I know you have some stuff to work out, but it's time to play.
She counts down for the first time.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
Matthew looks down at his selection and screams. He had thrown scissors, and Steph had thrown rock. The rock inside the table slams down on Matthew's hand, driving the screws deeper and crushing his knuckles with a pop. Matthew grunts and tries to suppress the urge to pass out.
1-0. Let's continue. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Matthew looks down. He threw a rock this time, while Steph throws scissors. The rock slams into Steph's hand, but she doesn't scream. She just grunts like a monster hungry for Matthew's blood.
1-1.
Geraldine giddily calls out, "Let's fucking go," Steph says after.
That's the spirit, little girl. Alright. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Matthew throws scissors and Steph throws paper. The rusty scissors snip closed and cut off Steph's pinky finger, middle finger, and ring finger. She cannot not scream at this, and she wails as her hand is mauled by the scissors. Blood shoots all over the clear box.
1-2. Ready? 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Steph then finally realized that throwing paper wasn't the right play again when Matthew throws scissors. The scissors cut through the rest of her fingers and she turns as pale as a ghost, clearly about ready to pass out.
We have a winner!
Geraldine calls out. The screws release Matthew's hand and he falls back with a yelp.
Matthew's the winner. You'll be set free. If you kill Steph right now. There are several things under the table to use.
Matthew calls out, "That's not fair. She never said he'd have to kill her." Geraldine says,
He must not have listened to the rules carefully. The winner chooses who lives and dies, it said.
Matthew says he can't do it. It's sick. Geraldine says,
But he can.
Matthew then says, "Then I won't." Geraldine says,
Okay.
after which the screws release Steph and she falls back. But before Geraldine even says anything else, Steph grabs the scissors and rushes at Matthew, but he sidesteps and bumps into the table. Steph then tackles him and stabs the scissors into his shoulder and then raises it again. He calls out that she doesn't have to do this. This is sick. You don't have to be like her. Steph says, "She isn't making me do this. I want to do this." Her eyes lit up like fireballs, and Matthew thinks, in this one instant, that her eyes looked like yo-yos almost. He then remembers his yo-yo, the fireball. As Steph lunges at his face for the killing blow, he shifts his weight slightly and it barely misses, and Matthew uses the momentum and in one fell swoop, gets out from under her and grabs the yo-yo from his pocket and takes the string out and wraps it around her neck. "Steph, please calm down!" he yells out as she flails with blood getting everywhere from her hand. Matthew cries that he doesn't want to hurt her, but before he finishes that sentence, he realizes that her body's already gone limp. Her eyes' blood vessels have burst, and bile was pouring from her mouth. No. No. For a second, he feels like he's free, but then he realizes all he did was sacrifice someone else's life for his. "What have I done?" he called out.
A wonderful thing.
Geraldine says over the speaker.
A wonderful thing.
"That was amazing," Geraldine says as if she just had an orgasm. Fuchs says, "Yes, it truly was fun. This is the first of many, hopefully." Even entertaining the thought that this could happen again made Rock feel sick. "What do we do with him?" Geraldine asks. Rock finally then speaks up loudly. "We let him go." Geraldine and Fuchs both whip their head around and look at him as if he just said something awful. "But what did you say?" Geraldine asks. Rock says she promised. Geraldine says, "Well, yeah, but it was just for motivation. What good would a burnt little killer do for the world?" Rock thinks that almost describes him too. Some burnt killer. Rock says that he'll probably be kept up his entire life with nightmares, screaming at the thought of that death right there. But that is his right. He never saw any of our faces. Rock then saw the disgust in Geraldine's eyes for a split second, so he tries to reverse his thinking and says, "This wasn't your true masterpiece. This is just a prototype. I will personally serve you and make sure everything is perfect for the real deal. It is true, you have given me everything a man could want ever since you brought me in. But it's also true that I have never asked for anything. So just this once. Please." Geraldine then looks conflicted and says, "You know what? I was thinking the same thing earlier." Fuchs whips his head around and looks astonished. My lady, you can't be serious. Geraldine interrupts him and says, just this once. Rock gets his way. Rock slightly smiles, and Geraldine says, well, rest assured, Rock, you'll be working off this favor every day for the rest of your miserable life. Rock whispers, gladly. Geraldine then claps her hands. She says, everything needs to be torn down now. The pits filled in. The traps taken apart. She says that another reason she's letting Matthew go is because he gave her the fabulous idea crying for his mommy and daddy so much. Next time, she wants no first-person camera. She wants multiple cameras, and most importantly, parents. Rock drove in the rain, thinking to himself that he loves the gloomy weather. He doesn't know why. But today, he saved a boy's life. But at what cost? How many had to die because of it? How many more would die for this one child's life? How many more would head to the Borden estate? Can't save them all. Can't even save myself, he thinks. He wonders if that one small bit of humanity that Geraldine showed was something that was fleeting or something that could be grown. Maybe this one act of kindness was enough to put them all on a different path. He doubts it, though. He got to the playground that he took Matthew from and got out of his car in the rain. He went to his trunk and opened it. He grabs Matthew and sits him down on a swing, to which the little boy cries out, not again! But Rock says, it's okay. He's getting set free. He's gonna untie him. And after he counts to 20, he can take the bag off his head. Rock then unties his ropes and whispers in the little boy's ear, you did what you had to. Promise me one thing, okay? Through sobs and the sound of the pouring rain, Matthew asked, what? Rock whispers in his ear yet again. Don't let this define you. Don't let the bad things that happen to you be all your life's about. The boy nodded through the tears, and Rock finishes with one last line. Otherwise, you'll end up like me. Alright, one last chapter, let's go. Months later, Matthew sat in the living room with his mom and dad watching The Mighty Ducks on TV. That's my brother's favorite movie, by the way. He laughed a few times at the jokes in the movie, not believing that everything came back together like this. He learned that after he went missing, his mother and father had put aside their differences out of a common love. A common love for him. Every waking moment from the time he went missing, his parents looked for him. Together. Months went by and they spent more and more time together. Matthew looked down from his movie and saw his parents were wearing their wedding rings once again. Sometimes he would have nightmares about it. And even one morning he looked at the back of a milk carton and saw Kayla and Steph's face. He knew he couldn't tell people about this though. No one would believe him. A giant bouncy castle where a bunch of kids died in some death run? He would be called crazy. Besides, he saw no one's face. Didn't know where he was or any information about it at all. Sometimes it's better to be the bad guy, he thinks. He was a lot of things, he thought. A murderer. A liar. A disfigured child. But he squeezes his parents' hands one last time and he realizes that one thing he's not anymore is a child of divorce. That is Playground Child of Divorce. Do I think it's better than the original? No, but it's also not bad by any means. In fact, it's still better than several books we've already covered. I do believe that Playground is Aaron Beauregard's best work, and him continuing with the Playground story is a good move, as I do believe that Rock is actually genuinely an amazing character. In the original book, the book was a lot about the cycle of abuse and how human kindness, especially in the face of extreme trauma and despair, can break that cycle of abuse. If you haven't read the first book, like I said, you should really read it or watch my video on it. But it involves that final masterpiece of Geraldine and Fuchs's that they say about in the end. And, spoilers, at the end, Rox kills Fuchs and Geraldine and breaks the cycle of abuse because of the kindness of the people who had every reason to hate him. But you might be asking, what's the message of this book? Well, let's get into that right now. I believe the message here is in fact different than the original, which I believe is both a good and a bad thing. Because I'm happy it's something different, and I always appreciate when someone tries something different artistically, but I also feel it's sort of different from the main idea of the original Playground book. But that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you ask. But it's a good message anyway, and it's still good despite it not being the exact same as the original. I feel the message here is not letting horrible things define you, or trauma define you. Rock is a tragic character, a completely broken man who may or may not deserve what he gets depending on who you ask, which is a good thing. Being a divisive character is a good sign of a pretty damn good written one. I've heard people say that Rock has every single chance to stop Geraldine, and he's despicable for not doing so, and he deserves everything he gets. But I've also heard that Rock is a poor victim, just as much as everybody else. He was groomed as a child to be Geraldine's perfect machine for abducting children, all while being raped by her, his own adoptive mother. And in my opinion, it's a mix of the two, and that's what makes him great. Then there is another parallel character in this book, that being Matthew. Once again, he is completely a victim in the beginning. Then after all of the trauma, he is sort of groomed by Geraldine. Not in the sexual way like Rock, but in the way of being manipulated to be doing horrible, selfish things to survive. Did he have a choice? No, not really. He gets several people killed as well, though. People that were completely innocent. And then in the end, he murders Steph himself, even if it wasn't self-defense. He does kill her. Rock then ends up seeing himself in Matthew, as someone who had to do what he had to survive. Rock gives Matthew the most important line to the message of this book after he drops him back off in the playground. He says, "Don't let this define you. Don't let the bad things that happen in your life be all your life's about, or you'll end up like me." Saying that Rock is crushed by all that he has done, and he is certainly not the best person because of it. So, like the message of this book says, don't let the bad stuff in your life define you. You are bigger than your trauma. But I want to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and comment if you think Rock and Matthew are innocent victims, or just as guilty as Geraldine, or somewhere in between. I believe they're both in between, but what do you think? Thanks for watching. I really appreciate and love each and every one of you. This becoming my job is a dream come true, and the fact that you all help me do this changes my life. And the fact that you guys watch these little videos mean way more than you think. And each and every one of you guys is a hero to me. Words cannot describe how much each of you mean to me. So seriously, thank you all. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.